All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Caitlin Iseler. I'm the founder and CEO of Happily. We're so thrilled to have you here today for our in-person friends as well as remote. We've got a big treat for you in terms of our speakers. We'll start with Jennifer Hicks, who will go through some tactical things that we can do to bring teams together from a manager standpoint, thinking about how to manage in a distributed and new world of work. And then our incredible panel that she'll have some great insights on the topic as well. Happily is an engagement and wellness solution. We help teams gather in healthy ways, whether that's in person or remotely. We do this with a mix of events as well as our software platform. And then we are so grateful to our sponsor for this event today, NFP. They are our insurance partner. They help us with everything from health insurance to life insurance and everything in between. So if you're looking for a great partner there, we couldn't recommend NFP more. So thank you. All right, we're going to jump in with Jen. Did I call you Hicks? Sorry. Jen and I have known each other a long time, so I'm announcing her as her maiden name, so I apologize. I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of jump in, but the way this topic started is Jen and I were actually at a retreat, and we were talking about her passion for being a manager, training managers, and how that impacts the business. And I was so blown away because I tend to lead with love, a lot of love. That's what I tend to lead with. And that's a part of being a good manager, but I think this other part that Jen leads with is really having like a cadence to how you communicate, a cadence for how you connect with your team, whether that's in person or remote. And so I think you guys will really enjoy this toolkit that Jen's put together, and I hope you'll be able to take it back to your companies.
Thank you, Caitlin. So for those that don't know me, my name is Jennifer Hicks Parulekar. It's okay. I'm very attached to my maiden name. I made it my middle. I'm a talent acquisition leader, and I've had the opportunity and challenge of managing both in-person and remote teams, including a crash course in May of 2020 when I returned from maternity leave to a team that was fully remote that had been fully in person when I left. And I know I'm not alone in that experience. As I look back across my career, as Caitlin mentioned, my passion is helping others grow and develop in their careers. So I'm not surprised it came up in a conversation that we had on the topic, and I'm excited to be here today. I think the biggest challenge that managers have in remote environments is the lack of training on the topic, which is why I'm so glad that this, so excited this event is happening. We've all heard the old adage, right? People leave companies, people leave companies. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. And look, I'm not here to debate whether or not that's true, but I think as employees ourselves, we can all appreciate the unnecessary work and stress that comes from poorly trained managers. And the good news is the best practices, right? So the toolkit that Caitlin mentioned, you all should have access, right? Those best practices, they're obvious and easy to implement. The magic is in teaching managers how to implement those consistently and hold themselves accountable for developing a framework to do so. The panel will talk, about a lot of these topics in more detail, so I won't go through every obvious best practice, but I'll go into detail and with one as an example, so we can talk through why the framework is important and how it's nuanced. So communication, right? No surprise to anyone either online or in this room today that communication is critical to engaging and motivating any team, especially one that's remote. What's not as obvious, though, is what that looks like in practice, right? Because it differs by team. Do you meet with your team, your direct reports weekly? Do you meet with them biweekly? How often do you get your broader team together? Is that quarterly? Is that monthly? As a manager, it's your responsibility to create a framework, a communication framework that makes sense for your team and honor those commitments, right? So if you, commit to meeting with your direct reports weekly, minimize reschedules, come prepared with an agenda, make the most of that time together, and don't stop there, right? Ask your team member, is that working? I like to use the start of a new year as a natural time to do a refresh on how I'm spending time in my calendar. So maybe that weekly meeting is too much, a biweekly would suffice. Maybe meeting quarterly as a team isn't enough, we should meet, monthly. Whatever that is, the important thing is holding yourself accountable to making sure that you put that framework in place. And it's also important, right, to, as I think about building relationships with remote team members, it's important to think about how you're engaging them, and it's what questions you ask. So maybe it's the introvert in me, but just saying, "Oh, how are you today?" right, doesn't generally solicit a genuine response. Much better question would be to start off a one-on-one and say, "Hey, what's top of your mind today?" right? And give them space to really think about what's top of their mind, whether it be work or personal related. As a manager, one other thing I'll say on the communication topic is, how important it is to really get to know your team members on a personal level. And this is true whether it's remote or in person. It's thinking about things like what skills and experiences do they want to build? How do they like to be recognized? If you can't answer those questions for every member of your team, that's a conversation that should be happening. One of the my favorite questions I like to ask new members of the team are, being a talent acquisition leader, right? What is your recruiting superpower? Or what do you want to be known for on the team? Another amazing question might be, hey, if you were going to teach the team something, what would that be? If I know that this new member is really passionate and skilled at sourcing candidates, right, I can give them more tasks associated with that. I can help connect them with other members of the team who might benefit from that expertise. And so, I recommend individual development plans for every member of your team, which answer a lot of those types of questions. And there's a ton of free templates online that, you can go to for resource. But bottom line, the more you get to know your team members on a personal level, the easier it is to motivate and engage them. And the last thing I'll say on the communication topic before we kick off the exciting panel is, it's really important don't underestimate the importance of soliciting feedback from your team, right? What's working, what's not. I think as managers, we often feel responsible for having all the answers or figuring things out. I don't know who needs to hear this today, but I'm giving you permission. You don't, right? Some of the most brilliant solutions have come from members of my team. So make sure that whatever framework that you have in place is leave space for soliciting feedback from your team so you can continue to grow and evolve and iterate on that framework. Look, I love this stuff. So I also enjoy connecting with other smart people and talking about it. So if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please look me up. The long name, right? Jennifer Hicks, my maiden name, Parulekar. I'd love to connect with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Caitlin so we can continue the discussion with some really smart folks on this topic.
Thank you so much. I would just share, what Jen shared is thinking about it from the manager perspective. And I think a lot of people that are in CPO or CHRO roles maybe are more attuned to do this naturally. But I think what Jen has provided in the toolkit, you can bring that back to your teams, your managers that are managing engineering teams or marketing teams. And hopefully this is a toolkit that they'll be able to use and reflect on as they're thinking about how do I keep getting better to support my team, whether we're in person or remotely, and really connecting with them deeply. So thank you. This is an amazing kit you put together. Thank you. Does everybody online have access to it? Yeah. Awesome. So it should be in the chat online, and let us know if you have any questions on that. And again, connect with Jen, follow the great work she's doing, and hopefully that was really helpful. All right, our panel, come join us, please. All right. right, everybody. Well, I told our panel we weren't going to spend a lot of time with introductions because we want to really value your time and make sure that you're getting the best out of this experience and time that you're sharing with us today. But I'm going to take that back a second. If you guys can just introduce yourself really quickly, 30 seconds or less. What does your company do? Who are you? And like, why are you passionate about this topic? And then we'll jump into the meat of this and hopefully some really tactical solutions that everybody in the room and at home can use as you go back to your companies.
All right, I'm Meredith Nichols, and I'm at Resonate. I'm the VP of HR at Resonate. We are a SaaS company that helps in the marketing industry. I'm passionate about this because I just love to help people grow and develop. I think that is key, people first. So that's why I'm here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Asila, Calhoun. I'm a leadership coach and consultant, and I had over 25 years in HR before doing coaching and consulting. So have sat in your shoes and walked in your shoes, rather, and been in your seats, and really love this topic because things have changed so drastically in the last 3 years, and we need more and more tools and to continue to bring attention to this subject.
Hi, I'm Samantha Byrd, and I'm the Chief People Officer at Ease, and we're a SaaS technology solution that offers benefit administration to small and mid-sized businesses. So we work through benefit brokers to leverage online enrollment, ACA reporting, and your annual enrollments as well. I think this topic is really important because I believe that no company has ever invested enough money, time, or energy in their managers, and we can all do better.
Hi, I'm Frazitta. I'm the Senior Vice President of People and Culture at RIVA Solutions. We are a government contractor focusing on digital transformation, IT services, so we serve clients in almost every branch of government, employees in 30-plus states nationwide. Very, very passionate about this topic. I agree. No one's really cracked the code on this subject. I think as a company that's graduated from the 8A program and is now a large business, we're really on a cusp of trying to make sure that we're developing the right leaders and trying to figure out how to do it in a semi-hybrid or remote environment. So great topic, and hopefully we've got some insight to share with you guys today.
Amazing. So as I said, we're going to go super tactical in terms of this discussion. And if anybody in the room or in the chat remotely wants to throw in any extra questions, we're happy to make sure we incorporate those into this amazing session. We'll start with Samantha. So in your organization, do you feel like managers have the tools they need to lead in a remote environment or distributed environment? If yes, what are they? If no, what have you put in place in like a very tactical way that's moved the needle for folks?
Sure. I can talk about current organization and past organization because that was sort of the pivotal time that we moved into the remote-only space. So I can generally be very technology agnostic. Like, it doesn't matter what tool you're using because all of them come blank, and you have to figure out how to structure the conversations and how you want to drive those things. We have been using Lattice, which I'm a big fan of, even though there are lots of other tools out there. I just think it offers a lot of flexibility to have very structured interactions, and you also get really actionable data on the back end. You can tell which managers are doing their one-on-ones. You can tell, a weekly pulse survey. You can guide the agendas of those meetings. And so it just gives, I think for me moving into the remote workforce is, I didn't get to see teams interact anymore. I didn't get to see people work anymore. Sounds a little creepy when you say like watching people work, but like so much of what we do as leaders and as managers is observe things and understand how people are feeling and what's going on. And so I feel like this tool gives us a bit of a window into how those things happen and what's going on, so that I can follow up with my leaders and say, oh, well, your team scores have gone down over the last 3 weeks. What's going on there? You got stretched? Do you need more staffing? Or, a team is spiked and like, oh, well, what happened? Well, we won this big deal. Did you celebrate? Did you go do anything about that? Oh, well, no. Well, go do that, So, like, just really being able to, like, have more meaningful conversations with our leaders and organizations.
Meredith?
Sure. I would say, my previous company, it was implementing new tools and resources. We did different things with our Teams program, making sure things were integrating with our HRIS systems, but also kind of providing that guidelines of those one-on-one meetings, you know, making sure that people are having those, making sure that we're checking in to see who's engaged, who's not engaged. We actually did implement a cameras on policy because that is a true sign of who is actually engaged in the conversation. If we're not in person, again, I hate to say it, but we don't get to see things. We don't get to hear things like we used to in the office space. And so if you don't have your cameras on, I can't tell what you're feeling, how you might be reacting to what we're talking about. So that's really something that I think is actually a very important aspect of all of this.
Reaction to the camera on.
Microphones everywhere. People actually were fine with it. They had no problem. I came from the government space prior to, so we were very against cameras. It was very different for me to work for a SaaS company that was camera heavy. Of course, in the remote world, we had to be, but people were not opposed to it. They were open to having their cameras on. They understood what that meant, and they also actually started to see the engagement change. Managers started to see the engagement change, one-on-ones and team meetings, and so it was really important. I also encouraged them to walk around with your cell phone, do your one-on-ones outside, get up away from your desk, because we are just sitting there behind the camera and not really getting out and getting that fresh air and refreshing.
I love that. That's like a big core tenet of Happily, right? We're really big on finding different ways for people to make the work for them. And when people walk, they share so differently, right? They're like their brain works differently. They're more creative. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think the strategies that my colleagues here on the panel have shared are all excellent. It really is about just increasing that communication and knowing what is the best method for communication. You know, sometimes we just default and just go to the lowest common denominator, whether that's an instant message or a text. And if things are getting serious, the stakes are higher, then you got to kind of go up a level. So if it normally would be a text, then it maybe needs to go to an email. If it normally would be an email, maybe it needs to go to the phone. If you normally go to the phone, maybe it needs to be something on camera or in person even. So just knowing that depending on that topic and that subject that you're having a conversation about, choosing that right platform for the communication is super important.
Bobby?
So I agree with everything that's been said. I would say for our company, aside from engagement, which you guys have covered really well, a company that's grown so fast like we have, we hadn't done a good job until recently of really setting performance expectations in general for our managers, right? Or determining what is it that we want a manager to be? Like, who do we want you to be? And so as far as those tools are concerned, how do you do your job? And then how do you manage your team never really existed. And so we're literally doing that right now. Now, the employee engagement side of things, we have kind of a binary compliance thing. You have to have certain check-ins with your folks. You have to document them. But we're teaching you how to do that because people don't really know how to do that necessarily all the time. But I think some very basic things you would do in an organization, which is what is it we want you to do, and how are we going to measure it, are really important. Otherwise, people are completely lost. We're a Slack-heavy company. We're all over. I mean, we literally use everything. We don't have a camera-on policy, but I will say this: we've traveled a lot more as an organization. So, like this week, our CEO and a few other folks are in Chicago, meeting with a large group of folks we have there. So we're traveling more again. We're just getting out. It's made a huge difference in our employee survey results, just seeing people. We've encouraged folks to do more stuff in person. One cool thing we've been doing at RIVA every quarter is what we call in real life, or IRL. We had it last week where we fly leaders in from all over the country for 1 week, just come in the office, collaborate, spend that quality time with each other. And that's been a big boost to morale and stuff like that. So we're still a hybrid type company, but we're trying to do more on the engagement side that actually matters, where things can actually get done versus just talking.
Yeah, I love that. Dorothy Matlis is in the room, and she's with Predictive Index, and she actually works with Samantha and Meredith. And are you guys a PI shop too, or no? Anyway, it's an amazing tool for helping managers to understand their population. So as we go into what are the manager training and tools you're using, maybe you guys can both comment on how you're using PI in addition to other things to teach managers to better understand their people so they can actually be better leaders.
Yeah, so we implemented PI probably 3 years ago. Really, it is just an amazing tool to help our managers really know, look at themselves and see who they are as a leader, kind of how they work, what works for them, what might not work, but then also being able to assess their teams. Maybe an approach with XYZ works, but it's not working with this other person on my team. I can't figure out why. So you can take these assessments, have your team take the assessments, and then put the teams together where you better understand, okay, this is why this person isn't understanding what I'm asking them to do, or this is why this person doesn't like the feedback that I'm giving them. And so it really just helps the managers get to know their team a little bit better. We also use it in our interview process so that we can see who the individuals are and where they're going to kind of set in on the team. Are they actually the right fit culturally, as well as are they the right fit with their skill set? I think that that's really important, and it's been so fun to see the results of it. You get some people that are so excited about, oh, wow, that is really who I am. That speaks to me. I get this. This is awesome. And then you get some people that are very resistant. But I think it's very important to really know who you are as an individual, but then also it helps your managers.
So I think when I think about how powerful that tool was, I'll also sort of go in a flashback to March of 2020 when everything shut down on a dime and people who were together every day interacting suddenly weren't. We were no longer onboarding our peers and they got to sit next to us. We took coffee or they sat in a team meeting. So what I think the remote world or the hybrid world or whatever world we're living in today has really changed. It's slowed down our ability to effectively onboard and integrate people into our culture because we don't have these close personal connections anymore. You don't see people every day. In some ways, like being invited into someone's house and seeing their Zoom is like a really personal thing. Like you know more about me because you're looking at the pictures of the kids drew that are hanging behind me or things like that. So in some ways, I think the connection with all the video and the Zoom conversations and the one-on-ones is very personal, but I do think we sort of miss a lot of the nonverbal cues and just the interactions that we see, the tchotchkes that you have on your desk or, how you take your coffee is a silly one. But, and so with predictive index, what it does is it gives you a little bit extra insight into who that person is because eventually you learn who your coworkers are. Oh, they like this. This is how they like to be recognized. This is what's going on here. Oh, they like this. And when you don't interact with them every day or you don't sit next to them every day, it just takes longer to learn that. So this is like an on-ramp that says, oh, well, here is their behavioral profile, and that's going to give me some more insight into, one, how to communicate with them. Do they like Slack messages? Rather have an email? Do they want a Zoom call? Should we have a check-in at the end of the day every day? And so it just gives you the cues as a manager, even as a coworker, of like how to best build these relationships. And that's why I think tools like that can be really powerful.
Yeah, and I think if Bobby, maybe you can comment, and Asila, on like they're free tools, right? Like that's a great tool if you have the budget for it, but certainly some companies are in a place where they're cutting budgets and trying to like do with what you have right now. So like what manager training can be done maybe if you aren't fortunate enough to have a tool like that?
Well, we've used DISC, which I'm going to assume is fairly similar. The problem with that is it's time consuming and costly to some extent. We actually taught ourselves how to do it. So we kind of self-facilitate it, but it's difficult doing something like that remotely too, right? And so that's kind of the challenge we've had is do we fly people in? Do we do it in person? These things are normally very useful if you have people in a room together. So I'd actually be interested in hearing from anyone if there's a simpler process to do this and a cost-effective way to do it, because I think I mentioned this earlier. One of the things we didn't do a couple years ago when I got to the company was like, okay, you're technically competent, you're hired, versus like, do you fit in with the team? Do you fit in with the company's culture, as mentioned before? I mean, those are things we're probably really missing. I mean, we have some managers that are better assessing fit and stuff like that, but I'm actually looking for a more cost-effective way, an easier way for our team to be able to leverage a tool like that so we can use it a lot more than we have in the past. So.
I think it's a great idea. Our remote people might not be able to hear you, so if anybody in the room wants to add, let's make sure we give you a microphone so they can hear your wisdom too. Trying to leave through voice carried, so I hope that's the case. So as you think about, like, Asila, right, like people have these tools or you don't have these tools, but like managers need to be trained, right, in order to be effective for your organization. What does the cadence look like? What have you done in previous companies? What are you doing now as you help companies to figure this out?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to follow on to what was talked about with the assessments before I get into that, yeah. Caitlin, if that's okay. Assessments are just such a great way to have everybody on the same page and speaking the same language, so it really doesn't matter what tool you use. Obviously, there are some that are better than others. I've heard great things about PI. I've got a client who's really uses that extensively. DISC is another, and I'm certified in DISC as well. I also am certified in the TILT, which is a behavioral based assessment. And then, but there are some things that are low cost as well, or even free. So the VIA Character Strengths is a free online assessment that will tell you what your strengths are, and that can be a great starting place for a tool to have a conversation, find out what people's interests are. Again, it's all about having that common language, and then you can do things around it for setting goals with a team or even team retreats where you're going deeper into those assessments. So I just wanted to offer that.
That's awesome.
In terms of what to do, I mean, I think the first thing is to do an assessment, do a little bit of a gap analysis. Where are those things that most need attention from a training and development standpoint for managers, especially new managers? One of the reasons that I transitioned from HR to coaching is that I saw over and over again in my career, everywhere I worked, everywhere I didn't work, that new managers were sort of dumped into their roles, kind of dropped into the deep end. Bobby's shaking his head yes, and kind of expected to sink or swim. And they weren't given any tools or resources, just go for it. And promoted because of what they do technically, but not necessarily because they'll be the best people leaders. So what are the challenges that you see? Every company is different. Communication we've been talking about since Jen was up here earlier. That is a huge one that most organizations need to do some leadership training around. But where are those other gaps? What are people in your office about as HR professionals? What are those challenges? You know, is it employee relations and they don't know how to have difficult conversations? You know, is it around hiring and onboarding? Like, what are those gaps? And then developing a program from there.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting way of like celebrating the people that are doing it well as examples and not necessarily maybe focusing as much on the people that aren't doing it well, and then maybe they kind of learn through like osmosis and being like, oh, that's being celebrated. Are you guys doing any kind of like STAR programs to kind of extend what people are doing well, or what are you doing for the people that aren't doing well and you're like, okay, this manager needs like some 911 help?
So I think we have a couple of different metrics that we look at to evaluate. Of course, we get upward feedback from direct reports. We are also a very heavy OKR and like very steeped in that. So one of our metrics that we use for manager success is, are their direct reports achieving at least? So are they somebody who can get their teams? So we'll look at that, and when we see that someone's falling short there, then that's one cue for us to go in and sort of have a benefit intervention and talk about why the team short. Are there external factors there? Is it a shortcoming of the manager or not? And it's really a very personal and case-by-case basis. I also think that, you know, there's a lot of, well, we can use the generic term communication for that, but just being very prescriptive, and I think you mentioned earlier about what you want your manager to do. Like, what does, so, you know, are you having your weekly one-on-one? Do you give the feedback? And I think and are you just setting expectations there? So I think one thing we've done is just figure out how communication trickles through the, yes, we get together and we have all hands meetings where we, what are the times when we're getting just the managers together to talk to them, share that vision? And what we found is that, you know, having managers find information out, really bad. It's like they need to be able to, one, either prepare themselves for whatever information that is, or prepare their teams for what that is. So just being really cognizant of, like, okay, we have a board meeting on X date. We're going to have our all hands a week after that. But 3 days before that all hands meeting, we're going to have a manager meeting, and we're going to talk about what came out of that board meeting and how it changes the direction of this business, how it changes what we want them to focus on. So one, we talk about the business, but then we also bring a skill into that. Sorry about that. So, you know, maybe we're talking about hiring, and we'll have our talent acquisition team come in and talk about behavioral interviewing, or we're going into performance management season. How to write a good review. Everybody needs a refresher on that. How to take that feedback. And so really just developing, and the cadence can be different depending on how mature your organization is. But what are the topics that we need to talk about, that we want our managers talking about with our direct reports? And we have to tell them to do that. And then we have to follow up and make sure they're doing that.
One thing to add on to that, which is really interesting, with everyone being so remote, we stopped doing, we'll do like a larger, here's what we're doing this year in performance management type of discussion. But then we have like our HR business partners have much smaller meetings with our frontline managers, because you get into a meeting with, 100 plus people, half the people are not paying attention, and then you're expecting them to go execute something that, oh, we're just going to explain this once. So we'll do that, but then we'll have much smaller meetings where we focus on the expectations once again and do that repeatedly to make sure it sticks. And that's one thing we found very effective in not just relying on larger meetings where we're going to introduce what we're doing. We just constantly beat it into their heads. This is what we want, for lack of a better term. But that repetition is important, because you show it to one meeting and you're told what to do and somebody sends you a slide deck. That's not really going to resonate. And so we've had to, especially with not having folks in the office, repeatedly meet with managers and say, these are the expectations, these are the measurements, this is what we expect you to do, this is what your direct reports are expecting of you, which is also really important.
Meredith, anything?
Hi, Erica Baker. In a previous role, I was the lead for a new manager program at a large aerospace defense company. So a lot of the talking about technically savvy, moving to being a people manager was a real struggle. We know that managers are the linchpin between strategy and execution, and we've talked a lot about managers and then the people that are reporting to them, but how much also communication has to work upwards. And Samantha, you were talking about how onboarding has actually slowed down, essentially because of being remote. And I find the same is true for new managers in terms of leadership development. And when I was leading that new manager program, over and over again, I heard, and having been a manager myself, I don't have enough time. What is it that you're doing, if anything, to approach that? I mean, have you even stopped and said, the cadence of things, or the time commitment, or the things I call is like the flybys, when you're walking from your desk to the water fountain and you see someone and you get that, 30 seconds of, hey, how are you? How was the weekend? You're not doing that in person anymore. You're starting your conference calls that way, and you're eating 10 minutes of your agenda just to do those pleasantries at the beginning. So it's taking more time to do what is expected of a manager role. Have any of you taken that into account of either, we're not having more than 3 meetings back to back to back, or something to that extent? And I know it's on a case-by-case basis of how people work, but have you heard that, and have you done anything to address essentially just the time element?
Yeah, I mean, the time is a huge thing. I think if you look at all of our calendars, they are jam-packed with meetings, and I think we actually are a little excessive on meetings, some companies. That's something we're trying to break, and our managers right now, our biggest complaint is the time. For us, it is encouraging them to block their calendar, encouraging them to really each week on Sunday night or Monday morning, just block your calendar, or even the week before, to set time for yourself. Because if managers aren't taking care of themselves, then they're not able to take care of their direct reports. But it starts from the top. What are we doing as leaders to encourage them and allow them to feel like they're able to take that time to step away? Because the thing I hear from managers more and more is, I can't take that break. I don't have the time. I can't take that vacation. What's going to happen? company's not going to go under. We need to be empowering our managers to be able to take that step away to refresh, but also, again, to just kind of structure their days a little bit differently. Sometimes I do group meetings rather than just individual meetings. I find that that's really helpful. I'll start the first 10 minutes of the meeting saying, tell me what's going well. It doesn't have to be about work. It can be personally. Tell me something exciting about yourself. And then what do you want to share? What do we have going on this week? What do you think we need to be focusing on? And then I'll also do those individual meetings as well. But it definitely is a struggle, but it's all about empowering them to take that time for themselves.
How do you make sure, oh, sorry. Oh, cool. Let me ask this one quick follow-up to this. How do you take the good things you're doing and make sure that managers in your organization maybe have access to that toolbox too?
So we have a company page that we have different tools and resources on there, from PowerPoint trainings or trainings that we've done, and making sure that those are accessible for all of our employees. I've really started to put together questions for our hiring managers before they promote an individual to a manager, and are we asking the right questions? Are we just promoting them because they're great at their job, but are they actually going to be able to manage a team? Is that actually what they want to do? Oftentimes we don't even ask that. And I think that if we're not asking that question, and we're setting a manager up for failure. And so I kind of having those resources readily available, trying to do annual training, also just trying to do the basics. It doesn't matter where you are in your career. I think training is always important. I think leadership, management, refresher training is always important for all of us. The world has changed so much. And so having those resources available, but then also offering the opportunity for them to come sit in on my one-on-one, or come sit in on my team meetings, or how can I help you with your management? And just having that open conversation really, really helps.
That's awesome. Thank you.
We have a question from Zoom that I think is a great follow-on from Lucy Winterhalter. She says that she would love some general advice about writing a manager's handbook. She's started one several times, but gets overwhelmed about what to include. What's crucial? Should it be tied into the employee handbook? And then how can she get managers to buy in?
Is it actionable? I mean, I guess my question would be, going back to what we said before, is what does it take to be a manager in your organization? Then how do we hold you accountable for being that person? I mean, I think it's pretty much that simple. Like, what do you need to do, and then how I'm going to measure how good you are at it. And maybe it's not that simple, but I think it kind of is. You know, it's not rocket science. Here's our business. Here's what we do. Here's what kind of leader we expect you to be. The only thing I would challenge, though, as far as we've put lots of documents together and they just kind of sit on SharePoint and collect dust. You know, as our team, and we're not perfect, so I'm not going to sit here and say that we are. We really do try to train and retrain. I mentioned that earlier. I mean, you just have to, you know, whether there's an employee relations issue you're dealing with where you can course correct, or you've got a good example of somebody who's doing a good job. I'm pushing our HR business partners to really coach our leaders constantly. It's a nonstop process, because we're really good at putting PowerPoint presentations together, but unless someone's going to actively go get it, it's not really going to be that effective. It's literal, like, day-to-day coaching I think is effective.
To add to that, I know exactly the headspace she's in. Like, she can visualize this, like, great plan that connects all the dots in the organization, and picking where to start is overwhelming. Like, and so it's like, it's one bite at a time. Like, what is the problem that you are dealing with today? Let's document that. Like, here's the SOP for tactically how we do it in whatever system we have, and then here's our best practice for what that is. And then, whatever format. I mean, some organizations are PowerPoint heavy, some organizations are brief heavy, but whatever that looks like. Is it a Slack channel for your managers? But, like, let's address the problem we have, and let's give you some best practices, and then we'll move on to the next one. And then eventually we can come back and we can tie all these things together, but you don't have to do it all the time. And the other thing I would say is, like, it's not HR's job to write that in a vacuum. You have got to collaborate. Like, what team do we see this problem on? Like, let's go work with that manager or that department head and help them solve the problem. but it's not, it can't be only us. We can't do it in a vacuum. What did you?
Yeah, and it really go to that team that's doing it well. In addition to the team that's not doing it well, what are they doing? What are those best practices that other groups can take advantage of? Because that's really important to capture that, especially now with things a little bit more challenging to communicate with one another, and as was said, things kind of dying on SharePoint or whatnot. So I agree wholeheartedly with start just a little bit at a time, really identify what that framework is, what those top leadership or management traits or topics are. You know, many of our companies have our values, so how do we tie maybe some training and leadership to those values that we have and then develop something from there. And I think, you know, to Bobby's point, coaching, continually having conversations, creating even small groups of managers, cohort style, to train and learn together with training and coaching and just developing. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if all big companies are like this, but at Korn Ferry, and Jane Sue's in the room, she's a partner at Korn Ferry, we, like, all of our training was mandatory. So, like, there was this piece of it, like, if you didn't finish your training modules, no matter how boring they were or felt, like, you got locked out of your email, which was kind of bananas. But, like,
No bonus.
But, like, you had to do your training, and it doesn't, like, I don't know, like, I wonder how much of it we have to move to a place where you say, like, this is just table stakes. You can't just, like, choose to engage in it or not choose to engage in it because it's a huge impact on the business.
Yeah, we're now making it, like, punitive if you don't do this stuff. I mean, unfortunately, when you ask at times, please do this, it sounds optional, like you just said. Now we're like, well, if you don't do it, there's going to be a severe consequence, and, like, you hate to do that, but you got to change your culture somehow, and that's one way to do it, is just to be really, really strict, like you said, about executing it.
I'll tie it back to Erica. I think your question was, like, you've just added time to my calendar. Now I have to do 10 hours of training. Right. Like, I'm actually going to try to get locked out of email. That sounds refreshing. But to circle back to that, I think one thing that organizations are still learning as we're moving through the post-pandemic world is the things that we did when we were in office to manage people, all of us just layered that on top of the remote world, and it's a different world. And so we're, like, I think slowly realizing that we can't do that. One thing we did was we limited the number of direct reports, and that sounds like a really basic thing that we should have done, 20 years ago. But, like, nobody has more than 5 direct reports, because that's one 30-minute call once a day. If you're doing a weekly one-on-one, you can spread them out over a week. And so, because we had people that had, like, 13 direct reports, and, like, I don't know, that makes me cry. Like, it sounds terrible. So, like, that was, like, a really simple thing. Okay, you only have 5 now. And then it's also, by doing that, on some larger teams, it created a dynamic where other people got sort of a preview of what it's like to manage someone. And so we started delegating more of that management authority down through the organization. It may not be, 100% of it, or they're writing the performance review, but they get a preview of what it's like to manage others' work.
Some of the clients I had in government contracting, because sometimes people aren't using their cameras. We've had the switcheroony occur, like, somebody else is doing the work, which most managers are like, okay, now what do I do when I know that somebody is switching out, having someone else do their work? And the other part we've seen is people moonlighting, so, when you don't see people, and people can go dark for a while. So I think that there's this thing from a leadership perspective, how to manage your employees in a different environment. But I think there's a different challenges that no one, from a human capital perspective, that we've ever had to deal with. So, I don't know if there's best practices on that, but those are just some of the things that has been occurring as we're coming out of the pandemic and working virtual.
Yeah, the moonlighting clause is becoming very popular, getting added in every employment agreement.
A quick question related to that. So for the panel, how do you help your managers with, I'm just going to assume here that all of us in the room probably started working before the pandemic, so we kind of knew how it was to work, right, and like collaboratively. But for the early career talent and interns, right, they might not have that experience. So how do you help your manager with that specific population?
We had them come in 3 days a week, our interns last year, or 2 days a week. They require a lot of that in-person stuff. I mean, our team, we're in the office 2 to 3 times a week now. We're getting ready to have a more junior person join our team. We're just, and it's not all day, by the way. You know, we'll come in after rush hour, if there still is rush hour, so to speak. We'll spend a few hours together, and then we'll go home. So there's definitely some balance to that. But with our junior folks, I know we have the ability, because all of us generally work in the D.C. area. We do make sure they come into the office, so there's a lot of that hand-holding and mentoring. I don't know that that's possible for everyone, but we try to get those folks really connected in the office a couple times a week now.
I would just say education, you know, because what we see with the younger generations anyway is that they just need a little bit more information about what's best practice, how do you behave at work. And so, so taking that time to really create either documentation, training, just kind of some special orientation about expectations so that you can hold them accountable after, in addition to what Bobby said about just in the office. I mean, they're just probably not a population that you can leave out there solo.
So just a little bit on the Happily side, like our vision is that the world changes a little bit in terms of how companies bring people together, and this means maybe we're not spending the money on the happy hours because a lot of people don't want to go to happy hour anymore. They don't want to go to a dinner. So like our business now has become a business that helps teams gather in healthy ways, whether that's remotely or in person. And for us, volunteerism is at the heart of that, an active lifestyle. And I share that for a little context because like for us, we're seeing it work with the companies we work with, but like what are you guys doing to bring people together? Like, you know, I'll hate to bring, you know, if you have hundreds of employees, flying everybody into one place once a year is really expensive. Like, what are the things you're doing to make people feel super connected on the personal level so that they can then do better work?
Yeah, I mean, the lunches are no longer working. People don't wake up in the morning saying, I want that free lunch. I wish they did, but no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we really started to kind of implement different trivia games. We actually partnered with a company called CourseForce. They do these awesome trivia games. HR wasn't running it because I found that the more events that I was running, people did not want to attend. I don't think it was anything personal. It's just HR in general. And so we would have this outsourced individual through CourseForce do the trivia. And it was fun because people got to be broken up into teams and they got to work with people that they didn't get to work with on a daily basis. So it was an hour of their time in the middle of the day that they just got to go into breakout rooms, talk, have fun, and then get back to their work after. So we did different initiatives like that. We did a lot of recognition. We implemented a fringe program that we started, which is a points program for the recognition rewards. But, you know, ultimately, it's, like you said, it's too expensive to bring everybody together. So we have to find other ways to be able to do that.
I'll just add, really, the volunteering is huge, and seeing more companies wanting to do more with volunteering and bringing people together for those activities, whether they're online or in person. So, for example, what we just did earlier with creating those bags, that was tons of fun. Didn't take a lot of time, but you leave with these feel good. So I'm seeing more of that with my clients as well. Just how can we get people together to do some volunteering?
Just for those that weren't here to experience it, can you share a little bit about what we did and like what?
Yeah, so when we arrived today, the Happily team had a bunch of snacks out and also Ziploc bags, and we created snack bags that will be given to, tell me, Caitlin, because I don't know.
Level 1 is what they're called. Title I school. So whenever we do an event or when our partners do an event, you try to give back to the community. So we made these snack bags together. And certainly, like, the impact of giving those snack bags matters, but what you get out of it is you're talking to people in different ways. You're connecting.
Absolutely. You know, for those that I hadn't spoken to when they arrived, just getting to chat with people casually while we were making the bags. It was just a lot of fun, and it just does something in your endorphins that really makes a difference.
don't know that we have sort of cracked the code on how to get people back excited, engaged in the office. I think we've tried a lot of different things. Certainly during the pandemic, what we found is that we were an organization that we used to get together and, pack the lunches or go to the soup kitchen. And we went from a company that was in 3 locations with about 100 employees to a company that was in 44 states with 300 employees. Like, we're everywhere now, and we can't get together. So we created we do an annual report on all the good that the company does. So what we found is everybody got involved in their personal communities. So they were already volunteering at their church, or they were a big brother or a big sister, or they were leading a Girl Scout troop. So we gave people 8 hours. We gave them 1 work day every year, and sort of the requirement that you have to use that 8 hours is you have to write a report, and we have it in a Slack channel, and then we actually create a report at the end of every year of like, here's the good that this community, our organization, some of them never met each other, but here's the good we're doing in our communities. And so it's not bringing us like physically together, but it's helping that community share all the good stuff they're doing every day, really promoting that. Because people are proud when they do that. When there were the storms in Florida, we had a ton of employees impacted by that. And like, got pictures of them literally stacking sandbags or like packing lunches. And so like, it was nice to give them a place to share that and get some validation for the work that they've done. So a little bit different from what you guys are doing, but it was just, how do we create a community there?
I think that's brilliant, and it's like what we want to give this community, like everybody in the room and everybody that's joined remotely, is like tactical ways, and right now, no-cost ways to bring people together, so I love that.
We already had unlimited PTO, so it cost us nothing. So.
Bobby, anything on your side, or?
So very similar stuff. During the holidays, we'll do some boxed meals and stuff for military families. So we do that once a year. We've been doing 4 years of community service hours that we offer up to our employees to kind of do what they want to do on their own. We haven't really cracked the code on doing the 1 day a year we would do it like a Deloitte. So it's hard to do that when you're dispersed everywhere. But what an amazing point to bring all those good things together and document them. That's one thing we've never done. So I just learned something new. So we'll try to do stuff like that. Given it sounds great. It's free, and so people have the freedom to go do that and use those hours every year. But we're not asking them to, hey, send us pictures. What have you actually done? That's probably something we need to do a little bit better.
Yeah, closing the loop on it and reminding people, right? It's almost like a drip campaign after you get together to remember the good feelings that you got when you did get together. So we'll go into some audience questions in about a minute and a half, but I wanted you guys any managers that you've had in your career that have done things that have really moved the needle for you, or managers you've seen in your community that are doing good things that other people might be able to take back to their companies?
Yeah, I think that it's just empowering. It's about empowering. I've had a manager when I first started my career in the DC area who just empowered me and trusted me to make those decisions, and would always wouldn't put me down if I wasn't correct, but he would ask in a different way, or he would encourage me to go back and do it again. I appreciate the direct feedback. I appreciate I don't want to do this 15 times. Just what did I do right, or what did I do wrong? And just kind of helping me through that process and understanding that, everybody has different ways of doing things. But if you're empowering your managers, that's truly what's important. Also advocating for yourself. I think we forget to encourage our managers, encourage our employees to advocate for themselves. Like, what is working for you? What isn't working for you? What do you want to do? And that's what's really, really helped me. And just that little piece of advice from my first boss was truly how I've gotten so far in my career.
Yeah, so I think that especially remote, I was, my last company that I was working for, I started off in the office and then moved up to DC, so I was the only person on the team. So it felt like remote, even though I was in the office. And one of the things that, first I'll say, when I started, very welcoming and creating that sense of belonging. The team had a little welcome package for me when I started and had things that we all need at our desk, like lip balm and mints and Kleenex, because especially in HR, right, we need Kleenex. And so that was one thing to start. And then when I moved to DC, there was a team meeting that we were having, kind of like a kickoff, kind of refresh with the team. And she sent a Panera gift card so that I could get lunch too, even though I wasn't in the room with everybody else. And so things like that just really can make a difference, where I felt like, okay, I matter, I belong here, and it was welcoming. So I think that's always super important for managers to keep in mind, and you can still do it with remote folks.
I think I've been very fortunate in my career to have a lot of good managers. I've had not so good managers too, and when I look at sort of those different relationships, I think the one thing that ties all the good ones together was building a really strong, trustful relationship. So it's not any different from where we started this conversation on getting to know the people that you work with, and so when I had a manager who I felt like knew and understood who I was and trusted me to make decisions good or bad and let me try things and fail and retry and get things done, I think that was really helpful. A couple of tools along the way that people recommended to me that I found really helpful, the Manager Tools podcast. They run great trainings, but they give it all away for free in their podcast. So, and it's great for managers, it's great for employees, it's great for executives. So that's been really helpful. I would recommend Getting Things Done to anybody if you like to read books and sort of applying that methodology. But those are the things that I think have helped me along the way.
I would say the first really strong manager I had at Northrop Grumman, I was a junior HR business partner, and I used to walk into her office and complain, this guy's doing this, and she's doing that. There was a lot of complaining and absolutely zero solutioning. And so one day she said, it was about a month after I started working for her, she's like, you got to come in here with some solutions on how to solve the problem. Like, give me some recommendations, and then I'll teach you and kind of work through that. That was like the best advice I ever got, because it helped me grow really, really fast. If I thought through a problem, she's like, there's no wrong answer, right? Unless you're, thinking of something just outrageous, which I didn't. She was just like, come in here with 2 to 3 solutions, and you and I will talk through the right one. And then gradually I became competent enough to be able to do that on my own. I just thought that was just great teaching. The other thing, the very good HR leaders that I've had in my life, because that's what I do, have always made a point to give me the confidence that I do drive the business. Like I am a very important function to what we do as a company. I do impact the way we make money and how we make money. So I think that's really important. I try to impress upon every team that I have is you're an expert in what you do. You got to act like it and have a lot of confidence that you're having an impact. We're not the event coordinators, right? We're in the people business. So you got to act like it. You got to have that confidence that you do impact the business. And so the really good leaders I've had have always emphasized that. So that's why I'm doing that today.
Awesome. Any questions from the audience?
Take a quick one from Zoom. Charlotte Mann would like to specifically ask Samantha, related to your delegating management responsibilities down the organization, what job titles are you promoting people into if they don't have all the manager responsibilities, but you want them to have some of those one-on-one management level responsibilities?
So I think that's a really important thing, and something that helped us at one of my organizations was going back to the career paths and making it clear to people that there is an opportunity to be promoted in the organization if you don't want to be a manager. So here's a technical track and here's a manager track. And I think that really helped people feel, people who didn't want to be managers feel like they had an opportunity to still move forward in the organization. But I would say in most organizations, or the way I've tried to build sort of getting into managers is there's probably one promotion before you be promoted into a manager. So if you think about sort of that, business consultant to engagement manager. So you start building, in that base level, you start talking about managing your own work, or maybe managing, you get to do a cross-functional management of a internal corporate project that we're working on. So are you managing a cross-functional team internally? And so that's a sort of no-risk internal thing that you're not customer-facing yet, where you get to try those things on for size and give feedback to people. And so you build those opportunities in at that lower level. And then maybe as you get that first promotion, you get to manage an intern. That's your next step. And so, like, again, lower stakes. It's a 3-month engagement. You're getting to write that first review about someone and take those steps. And then when you get to be that manager role, you've already done a couple of those things. And you've learned the language of the organization of how, like, here's the language we share when we talk about managing people. And here's how we evaluate the work that our peers do. And here's how we interview and look at those things. And so you're sort of gradually stepping people into that instead of the 6 months before they get promoted, they get into this crash course of that we're going to do all these things, and this is what we expect as a manager. So just can you trickle it in would be the best practice.
To that point, we've created not just the career paths, but we've rolled out promotion criteria, and it's very transparent. It's not locked up in a room. You don't have to guess. We show you this is what it's going to take for you to get promoted to the next level. And obviously, it's our job to help you do that. But I would recommend doing things like that, where you literally just hand it and say, look, this is what it's going to take to be promoted to, like you said, maybe that senior consultant level where you're managing a person or a work stream or something like that, where you can show you have what it takes. But if it's a mystery to the employee, they're never going to figure it out. And so we've tried to be very transparent on those sorts of things.
So I have not yet been a people manager in my career, but I'm getting to a point where I likely will be, and I'm applying for roles where likely will be. How would you recommend, as a new manager coming in and establishing that trust, those open lines of communication with a new report?
Jen's Toolkit will be a great starting place.
Yep.
So I think, yes, Jen's Toolkit for sure, really getting to know them on a personal level, getting to know what their interests are, taking that time to go deep into where do they want to be in a few years, how do you help them get there, just being really honest, having really open conversations with them, setting those expectations to Bobby's point earlier, and holding them accountable, because people do need to know what the boundaries are, what the guardrails are, and so just being really clear about that up front so that there are no surprises or mistakes that happen along the way. So just taking that time to really get to know them and let them know what your preferences are, right? I think sometimes we're so busy finding out about them that we're not necessarily sharing our own expectations or how we like to work best, and just have that be a two-way conversation that is going in both directions and everybody's on the same page with, this is the best way to communicate with me. I'm not a morning person, so don't come at me before 9 a.m. and I have my coffee or whatever it is. But people need to know that, right? I would always announce when I had direct reports, I'm grumpy today, so just FYI, just came up, woke up grumpy, so just so you know. So give them the opportunity to stay away if they wanted to, but it also makes you feel better, and it can lighten it up once you say it, you usually feel a lot better.
Yeah, that being human element. Yeah. Any other questions from our in-person or remote folks before we wrap up?
This question is coming from Roxanne Dos Santos. She would like to know, what tool or platform does your company use for community building versus productivity? Emails and Slack are more for productivity, but what are you doing non-work related in terms of platforms and getting people together and building company culture?
Slack.
I don't know that we're doing anything besides Slack and email today. I think there's a lot of add-on tools. We pushed different channels and different sort of promotion and engagement things through that channel, but we decided to meet people where we knew they were and not introduce a new tool. We do a lot of things with a quarterly remote event. where there's like an escape from Alcatraz type trivia thing or different things that are going on like that. There's probably more we could do. I'll just own that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think really just the Course Horse Fringe, which is a reward recognition program. One thing I did forget to mention with the community service is we actually created a bingo card for community service that was actually, it's free, it's easy to do. We found forcing people to do the engagement activities was not working. So this gave people the opportunity to do what they wanted to do, but also get recognized for that activity that they were doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. I hope that you'll be able to leverage the toolkit and these great insights in your companies. Thank you to NFP for sponsoring this event and for being such a great partner. Those that are remote, if you feel like going into breakout rooms, our team can get you set up there so you can have some networking opportunities remotely. Those of you that are here, I hope you'll engage with us, have lunch, meet a new friend, and maybe check out the Giveback activity. Thanks to everybody for coming, and such a pleasure sharing time with you.